Circuit number 2, we are adding a junction in here. We're gonna make our capacitor in parallel with the LED. Okay, so we're not putting two capacitors in parallel with each other, we're putting it in parallel with the LED, okay? So the way I drew mine was a little bit different than the one that I put into the lab, but it's you know, we can draw these all a little bit different, okay? So once again, we're gonna start with our positive. Okay, and in this case, we are going to our 1,000 ohm resistor. And again, you can either grab a new one or you can read, where's my camera? The itty bitty little lines here, the color coding system, and make sure you're using the correct one. Because if you use a 10 ohm instead of a 1,000 ohm, you're gonna have a whole lot more current than expected. In this case, I don't think I was playing around with a bunch of different ones, and it's not going to be detrimental, but let's just try to stick to the ones that we need here, okay? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make my outside loop first. And again, it doesn't matter, a junction is a junction, right? It doesn't matter if this is flip-flopped, you know, the first junction versus the second junction, they're going to act the same way regardless. Okay, so I did my power source, my red wire goes to my resistor. Now I'm gonna make this junction with my resistor right here. So this is my 330 ohm resistor, okay? And these little resistors are easy to bend, so I'm gonna bend them quite a bit to make it nice and close. All right, and I'm gonna use my same little green LED. And again, if you can't tell which one is short and which one is long, just grab a different one or try to stretch them so you can tell, because you definitely don't want to put those in backwards. All right, so that's this second branch here, and then I'm gonna again color code this one. This green, orange, and blue, you could have the blue go to all of those. I like to really make sure that my branches are separated from each other. So I do tend to use an extra wire. You don't have to, but I like to, so I do. Okay, so now I've got my red wire here to my resistor, and then I did this outside junction where I have my other resistor, my 330 to LED, and my wire, my orange wire, okay? So now we're gonna use, what is it, the 100 microfarad, and again, this one's a little bit more obvious than the LEDs, which one's longer, and so I'm gonna go back to this junction, right? So anytime we have this junction, I should have one coming in and two going out, so I'm gonna have three things along that same row, and then I'm gonna pick a different, oh geez. Okay, I did not set this green one up properly. Sorry. There we go. So this is always a good way to double check. I'm not quite sure what I was thinking. I just put them in order like that, where they have to be in the same row. So for a moment there, thought I'd redo this video, but it's probably a good learning lesson that I've got this resistor here is coming out of 15 and into 18, which means my LED has to come out of that same 18 in order to be connected. And I've got those going into 21 and then my orange coming out of 21. So I just set that up a little bit inconsistently there. But again, sometimes we learn more from our little mistakes. So I'm gonna let you guys see me making that mistake in this video. Okay, so now I'm going on my capacitor. And again, this is where, kind of like I mentioned before, you really want to make sure that none of these legs are touching each other, because that will allow that kind of bypass, okay? So mine are really kind of getting cramped here, and this is where if you use more wires, it seems busier, but it's actually a little bit more spread out, so that's up to you. Let me make sure I'm sticking with my color coding here. So I'm going from my capacitor back to this junction where my orange is. Okay, so I'm creating this junction over here. I've personally got in my 29 right there, okay? So, and I'm just gonna double check to make sure that I've got these in different rows. So these two are on 18, these two are 21, and then my capacitor I've got at 20, okay? So once again, red to resistor, and then I've got my capacitor coming out of that same line with my resistor into its own separate line, and then the green one into a junction, and then this 330 resistor is coming out of that same line with the capacitor and the 1000 ohm resistor, and that's going to an LED to the orange, and then I'm gonna put my blue back to the negative. So there we go. And then when we turn it on, again, my button won't stay connected, but you can just hold it down and watch, okay? So this one, when it says to pay attention, what happens, it does happen pretty quickly. So I do want you guys to make sure you're actually paying attention on what's happening here, okay? And then also, oh, it is, look at that, it's staying on now. Also, don't forget your 2 ways to discharge. Okay, if I turn that off, when I discharge it, I have to connect this back in here, so it's creating that loop, and this is slowly discharging. Or you can use another resistor, that the metallic side of the resistor, to touch both sides of the prong in order to discharge it, and make use of your voltmeter to ensure that it is discharged. We never want to leave anything charged putting them away. Again, these are very small components, but it's always better to be safe to make sure everything's discharged when you're done. Okay, so that is circuit number 2.